All right, so you've learned the basics of English,
Yeah.
right? You can have a conversation, but it's like, now what?
Yeah.
You've hit this wall, and you're not really sure how to like break through to that next level.
Totally. As the common feeling
for-
we'll talk about today.
Yeah, it's like you're past the beginner stage, but you're not quite at that advanced level where you feel truly comfortable and fluent.
Exactly. And we've got some really cool material to dive into today that I think will be super helpful for anyone in this situation.
Yeah, and what I find really interesting about this particular source material is that it goes beyond just giving generic advice. It actually digs into the science behind language learning.
Oh, cool.
So you know how our brains actually acquire new languages?
Yeah.
And how we can use that to our advantage?
I like that. So I'm flipping through this right now, and one of the things that jumps out at me is this emphasis on like active learning.
Yeah. And I think this is particularly interesting when it comes to speaking because, we all love to watch movies and listen to podcasts.
Right.
But this source is saying like, that's not enough.
Yeah.
You've got to actually be producing the language, not just consuming it.
It's like anything else.
Yeah.
It's the difference between like reading a book about how to play tennis
Right.
and actually getting out there on the court and hitting the ball.
Yeah.
Your brain needs that hands-on experience to really solidify those skills.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. But I will say, I think for a lot of people, myself included,
Yeah.
the idea of just going out there and like speaking could be kind of terrifying,
Oh, absolutely.
especially like if you don't have anyone to practice with.
Right.
So what do you do if you're in that situation?
Well, that's where this source material comes in handy because they talk about all these different ways to find speaking partners online.
Nice.
There are all these platforms now like HelloTalk or italki that connect you with native speakers who are also learning your language.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's a win-win. You both get to practice.
That's awesome. I like that. Okay, so that's a good tip for like overcoming that fear of speaking. But what about this whole shadowing technique?
Yeah.
I've heard about this before, but I've never really like understood how it works.
Yeah.
Or like why it's effective.
Yeah, I know it sounds a little weird at first.
It does.
But the basic idea is you listen to a native speaker and you try to mimic their pronunciation, their intonation, even like their rhythm.
So you're like their vocal shadow.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it might feel strange at first, but what's really cool is that by doing this, you're actually training your brain to recognize and reproduce the subtle nuances of the language. Like all those little things that make a native speaker sound like a native speaker.
So it's not just about like putting on an accent or something.
No, not at all. It's about really understanding the underlying mechanics of how they speak,
Interesting.
how they use their voice
Yeah.
and their mouth to produce those sounds.
So it's like a deeper level of learning.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So I'm starting to get this, but I'm wondering like, when would you actually use this technique?
Well, it can be really helpful if you're trying to, reduce your accent or improve your fluency for specific purposes. Like if you have to give a presentation.
Right.
Or, you're going to be speaking in a professional setting.
Gotcha,
So
yeah.
you can really target your practice.
So you can pick like specific people to shadow based on
Absolutely.
your goals.
Yeah, like if you admire someone's speaking style,
Okay.
you can try to shadow them and sort of absorb
That's a cool idea. I like that.
some of their magic.
That's a cool idea. All right, so we've talked about speaking partners. We've talked about shadowing. Another tip that caught my eye was this whole role-playing thing.
Yeah.
I always thought that was kind of like just for acting class or something.
Right.
But this source is saying it can be really valuable for language learning too.
Absolutely, because it allows you to practice real-life scenarios in a safe environment. So like, think about situations where you might feel nervous or unsure of yourself in English, like ordering food at a restaurant,
Yeah.
asking for directions,
Yeah.
giving a presentation.
Oh yeah, those are all scary.
Yeah, and role-playing lets you rehearse those situations and build your confidence
Okay.
so that when you're actually in those situations, you'll feel more prepared.
I actually did this before a trip to Italy.
Oh, really?
I was so nervous about like ordering coffee that I practiced like every day for like a week.
Wow.
Just saying like un cappuccino per favor.
And how did it go?
It actually worked.
That's awesome.
Like I went to the cafe and I was like,
Yeah.
un cappuccino per favor. And they understood me.
That's great.
It was a small victory, but it felt amazing.
Yeah, those small victories are important.
Yeah, they are. All right, so speaking of like different situations, one thing that this source talks about that I found really interesting was the importance of diverse listening material. So, like, why not just stick to, clear standard accents when you're practicing listening?
Well, the idea is to train your ear to adapt to the incredible variety of spoken English.
Right.
I mean, think about it. There are so many different accents and dialects out there.
For sure.
And if you only ever listen to one,
Yeah.
you're not going to be prepared for the real world.
Right. You're going to go out there and you're going to be like, what?
Exactly.
I don't even understand what anyone's saying.
Yeah, it's like, you wouldn't expect to become a world-class musician if you only listen to one genre of music.
That's true.
You need to expose yourself to different styles, different instruments, different rhythms.
Okay.
And it's the same with language.
So are you saying, like, I should be listening to a podcast from Scotland and then, like, a news report from Australia?
Yeah, exactly.
And then maybe, like, an interview with someone from the American South?
Exactly.
Like, all in one day?
Well, maybe not all in one day.
Okay.
But, you want to gradually expand your comfort zone. Start with small variations, and then as you become more comfortable, you can challenge yourself with more diverse accents and dialects.
Okay, so it's like a workout for your ears.
Exactly.
The more you stretch them, the more adaptable they become.
That's a great way to put it.
I like that. All right. So speaking of stretching our ears, this next tip really intrigued me. It's the audiobooks with text thing.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard about this before,
Yeah.
but I've never actually tried it.
It's a powerful one.
Yeah. So how does it actually work?
So the idea is you listen to the audiobook while simultaneously reading the text version.
Okay, so like you're seeing the words as you're hearing them.
It might sound like overkill.
Yeah, a little bit.
But what's fascinating is that this simultaneous input creates stronger neural connections.
Okay.
So you're engaging both your auditory and your visual processing, which reinforces the learning and comprehension.
So you're basically like creating this multi-sensory experience of the language.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Okay. So I can see how that would be helpful for like vocabulary and pronunciation. But does it also help with grammar?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because when you encounter a complex sentence in the audiobook, you can see how it's structured in the text.
Oh, that's cool.
It's like having a grammar guide built right into your listening experience.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. This is making me want to ditch my usual podcasts and like dive into an audiobook right now.
I know. It's a great way to learn.
But before we get too carried away with listening, let's move on to reading.
Okay.
This source has some interesting advice that goes beyond just like reading more books. It talks about the importance of like analyzing sentences.
Yeah.
Not just skimming over new words.
It's about being an active reader.
Okay.
Not just a passive one.
So what does that actually look like?
So when you encounter a sentence that you don't fully understand, take the time to break it down. Look at the structure, the punctuation, the individual word choices. It's like dissecting a complex machine to understand how all the parts work together.
So instead of just like grabbing my dictionary every time I hit a new word, I should be trying to like figure out the meaning based on the surrounding context.
Exactly. Think of it like solving a puzzle.
Okay.
Each word is a clue.
Right.
And the grammar is the framework that holds it all together.
Interesting.
So by analyzing sentences, you're not just learning vocabulary, you're learning how to think in English.
I like that.
Yeah.
So it's like a deeper level of reading comprehension.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Oh, wow.
I'm starting to see a theme here with all this advice.
Yeah, what's that?
It's all about like engaging with the language on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Not just like skimming the surface.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about writing.
Okay.
This is where I personally struggle.
Yeah.
I know writing is important, but I often feel overwhelmed by the thought of like composing long essays or stories or whatever.
Yeah.
So does this source have any advice for making writing practice like more manageable?
It does. It recommends starting small.
Okay.
So instead of aiming for a novel, focus on short journal entries, emails to friends, even just social media posts.
Okay.
The key is consistency.
Gotcha.
Making writing a regular part of your routine.
So like just like a little bit every day.
Exactly.
Okay. That feels much less daunting.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about speaking, listening, reading, writing. What about vocabulary?
Ah, yes. The building blocks of language.
Yeah, I feel like I'm constantly adding new words to my vocabulary list, but then I struggle to like remember them all.
It's a common problem.
Yeah. So does this source address this?
It does. It suggests ditching the random lists
Okay.
and focusing on thematic vocabulary acquisition.
Thematic vocabulary acquisition. What is that?
So instead of memorizing random words,
Okay.
group them by topics that are relevant to your interests or goals.
Loads up. Cool.
So, for example, if you're interested in travel, focus on learning travel-related vocabulary.
Okay.
If you're interested in business,
Yeah.
focus on business vocabulary.
It's like creating these little mini dictionaries for different areas of your life.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. That's a really cool idea.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of dictionaries, I noticed this source mentioned something called collocations.
Oh, yes.
I'm not familiar with that term. What are collocations?
So collocations are words that naturally go together in English.
Oh.
Like, for example, we say make a decision,
Right.
not do a decision.
Yeah.
And learning these pairings is a shortcut to sounding more natural and fluent.
So it's like understanding the unspoken rules of the language, like those subtle combinations that native speakers use without even thinking.
Exactly. And mastering collocations is a key step towards achieving that effortless fluency
Okay.
that often distinguishes advanced learners.
That's cool. All right, so we've covered so much ground already.
We have.
We've talked about speaking strategies, listening strategies, vocabulary, grammar,
Yep.
even a little bit of like mindset stuff.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I'm curious, does this source address the challenge of staying motivated?
It does.
Because I know even with like the best intentions,
Yeah.
it can be hard to like maintain consistency over time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Motivation is a huge part of language learning.
Yeah.
And this source offers some really insightful advice on how to stay motivated.
Cool. Well, I'm definitely interested in hearing more about that.
Yeah, we'll dive into that after a quick break.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned.
Okay, so we've talked about all these different techniques and tips, but
Yeah.
like how do you actually stay motivated?
Right. Like, how do you actually put all this into practice?
Yeah, because it's easy to like get excited about something and then
And go
like a
ready.
week later you're like,
Yeah, life gets in the way.
yeah, exactly.
You get busy, you forget, and then you're like, oh, yeah, I was going to do that.
Yeah, and then you feel bad about yourself.
And then you feel guilty, and then you're like, well, I'll just start again next week.
It's exactly, and then the cycle continues.
And then it never happens.
Yeah. So what does this source say about like breaking that cycle?
Well, one of the things they emphasize is the importance of setting realistic goals.
Okay.
So instead of like, aiming for this vague idea of fluency,
Right.
break it down into smaller achievable milestones.
So like instead of saying I want to be fluent in English,
Yeah,
I could say I want to be able to like confidently order food at a restaurant.
exactly. Or I want to be able to have a 5-minute conversation with a native speaker
Right.
without feeling completely lost.
Okay. So like smaller, more specific goals.
Exactly, because those smaller goals feel less daunting.
Right.
And they give you like a clear target to aim for.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for like those small victories.
Totally.
Like each time you achieve one of those goals,
Yeah.
it's like a little boost of motivation.
It's like a little shot of dopamine.
Right, exactly. And it makes you want to keep going.
Yeah. And the source also emphasizes the importance of celebrating those small wins,
Okay.
because it's easy to get caught up in what you haven't accomplished yet.
Right.
But taking the time to acknowledge your progress can be really motivating.
So maybe instead of beating myself up for like not understanding every single word in a podcast, I should be celebrating the fact that I understood like 80% of it.
Exactly. Focus on how far you've come,
Okay.
not how far you still have to go.
That's a good point. I like that.
Yeah.
But even with like realistic goals and a positive attitude, I think there's still that challenge of like, life just gets in the way sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
Like work deadlines, family commitment.
that new Netflix show that everyone's talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's hard to like make time for English practice when there's all this other stuff going on.
Right. And the source acknowledges that consistency can be a real challenge.
Okay.
But they offer a really cool suggestion.
Okay, what's that?
They say, make English practice a part of your daily routine, even if it's just for a few minutes at a time.
So like instead of trying to carve out this huge chunk of time
Right.
every day to study English,
Yeah.
I could just do like little things here and there.
Exactly. Find those little pockets of time in your day and turn them into micro-learning sessions.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
So like maybe while I'm waiting for my coffee to brew in the morning,
Yep.
I could review some vocabulary flashcards.
Exactly. Or you could listen to a 5-minute English news podcast
Right.
while you're getting ready for work.
Okay. So it's like sneaking in little bits of practice throughout the day.
Exactly.
I like that. It's like those fitness trackers that encourage you to get 10,000 steps a day.
Uh-huh.
You don't have to run a marathon.
Right.
You just have to find ways to like incorporate movement into your everyday life.
Exactly. And those small, consistent efforts add up over time.
Yeah, they do. And speaking of tracking progress,
Mm-hmm.
this source also recommends like actually tracking your progress.
How interesting.
Yeah, whether it's like a simple notebook or a language learning app.
Seeing how far you've come can be really motivating.
So it's like visually mapping out your journey. So
Exactly.
you can see all those little steps that you've taken. Okay, that's cool. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that like motivation ebbs and flows.
Oh, absolutely.
Like there are going to be days when you're super energized and ready to tackle anything.
Yeah,
And then there are going to be days when you just want to like curl up on the couch and watch TV.
exactly. And that's okay.
Yeah. So how do we like keep ourselves engaged even on those low motivation days?
Well, the source suggests that the key to staying motivated is to make learning fun and engaging.
Okay, so it's about finding activities that feel more like play than work.
Exactly. Think about your interests, your hobbies, the things that bring you joy,
Okay.
and then find ways to incorporate English into those activities.
So like if I'm a movie buff,
Uh-huh.
I could watch movies in English with subtitles.
Exactly.
Or like if I'm a music lover,
Mhm.
I could listen to English music and like try to understand the lyrics.
Yeah. Or you could even like join an online community of people who are also learning English.
So you can like connect with other people who are going through the same thing.
Exactly, because learning a language doesn't have to be a solitary activity.
Right. It can be social and fun.
Exactly. And the more you enjoy the process, the more likely you are to stick with it.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of like practical strategies and tips.
Mm-hmm.
But before we wrap up, I think it's important to like circle back to the why.
The why.
Like, why are we doing all of this?
Yeah, like what's the motivation behind all of this effort?
Yeah, because I think if we can connect with our why, it makes the how so much easier.
Absolutely. Like if you know why you're learning English,
Yeah.
you're more likely to find the time and the energy to actually do it.
Right. So I want to pose a question to our listener right now.
Okay.
What is it about achieving fluency in English that truly excites you?
That's a good question.
What are those dreams, those aspirations that are driving you forward on this language journey?
Yeah, because once you tap into that,
Yeah.
that's where the real magic happens.
Exactly. Is it the desire to connect with people from different cultures?
Mm-hmm.
To travel the world with confidence?
Yeah.
To unlock new career opportunities?
Right. Or maybe it's something else entirely.
Yeah. So take a moment to really reflect on those deeper motivations.
Yeah.
Because when you connect with your why, the how becomes so much easier.
It's like having a compass
Yeah.
that guides you through the vast and sometimes overwhelming landscape of language learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not just wandering aimlessly.
Right.
You have a clear direction, a destination in mind.
And remember, even if you encounter detours or roadblocks along the way,
Yeah.
even if you hit those inevitable plateaux, that's okay.
It's all part of the process.
It's all part of the journey.
Exactly. And the key is to like keep that curiosity alive, that passion for learning burning bright.
Because at the end of the day, learning English is not just about mastering grammar rules or memorizing vocabulary lists.
Right.
It's about opening doors to new experiences,
Yeah.
new connections, new ways of seeing the world.
It's about like expanding your horizons,
Exactly.
both intellectually and personally.
It's about becoming a citizen of the world,
Yes.
one conversation, one book, one song at a time.
I love that. Beautifully said. So like maybe you dream of reading Shakespeare in the original English,
That's a good one.
or maybe you want to be able to give a killer presentation in English to a global team.
Yeah, whatever it is that really gets you excited about mastering English.
And I think once you've identified that, like it makes the whole process so much easier.
It's like you've got a compass now,
Exactly. You're not just like wandering around in the dark anymore.
You know where you're headed.
You've got a destination.
And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it does. But, even with a compass, you might still run into some obstacles along the way.
Oh, absolutely. There are going to be detours and roadblocks and, maybe you'll hit a plateau or two.
Right. And it's important to remember that, like, that's okay.
Yeah. Those are all part of the journey.
It's not about being perfect. It's about just, like, keeping that momentum going.
Keep moving forward, even if it's just one small step at a time.
Exactly. And, like, never lose sight of that joy of learning.
Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to keep you coming back for more.
I totally agree. All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've talked about the challenges, the strategies, the mindset,
Yeah.
the motivation.
All the things you need to know to break through that intermediate plateau and achieve true fluency in English.
So to our listeners out there, we hope you found this deep dive helpful and inspiring.
Yeah, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep practicing, keep pushing yourself.
And never give up on your English learning dreams.
Because with the right approach and a little bit of perseverance, anything is possible.
That's right. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, this has been fun.
And until next time, happy learning.
Keep those conversations going.